bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
ayo me fele sama
me fele sama
mama me fele sama
me fele sama
isa me fele sama
me fele sama
ay mama me fele sama
me fele sama
brother me fele sama
me fele sama me fele sama me fele sama me fele sama me fele sama me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
ayo me fele sama
me fele sama
mama me fele sama
me fele sama
isa me fele sama
me fele sama
mama me fele sama
me fele sama
me fele sama
me fele sama
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama ayo
mina bakabusinengre mine pele obiama mina bakabusinengre me fele sama
ayo me fele sama
me fele sama
mama me fele sama
me fele sama
isa me fele sama
me fele sama
mama me fele sama
me fele sama
mama me fele sama
me fele sama
isa me fele sama
me fele sama
Fire burn them dirty king, blaze up them dirty king, fire burn them king. Send him disastrous, and time he fast with us, ancestors walk with us, fire burn them king.
Tendai Mwadi, be thankful unto the mother, father, creative life force of the universe. Kudzai Mudzimu Mukuru. Give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Fahodie, Abibi Tumi, African liberation and African power for all African people. Yeah, you don't know kings and queens, but they are again for all those who may not be aware. My name is ShakaRa, and you're live on Zivanayi, which is gotkushTV's weekly platform, yeah, for discussion. And just reasoning. Zivanayi spoken in the Shona language, which is mostly spoken in Zimbabwe, and it simply means let us get to know each other, yeah. And so it's an open platform, family, for the most part. Anyway, every now and then we have a specific topic or an interview as we did last week. I'm going to say more on that in a second. But for now, as you come through, please like up the video. Yeah, like up the video. And if you're so moved, let us know where you're listening from because we have an international audience. Yeah. So like up the video and also share the video, family. Also share the video. All right. I'm gonna be sharing the link at some point for ones and ones who wish to join the panel. You can feel free to do so very soon. Yeah, very, very soon. So do stay tuned for that. Do stay tuned for that. Do stay tuned for that. Okay. And yeah, as always, as far as housekeeping is concerned, want to let you know about our Patreon as Got Kush TV. If you just want to support the platform, support Got Kush TV, feel free to do so via our Patreon link in the description to this video. And I mean, feel free to give a one-off or a continuous, monthly donation. It's all well and good, kings and queens. All offerings are gratefully received. And also, um, if you want to receive notifications direct, I'm saying immediately and more in a more expeditious manner, feel free to join our Telegram group. Yeah, the Telegram group link is also in the description. Yeah, is also in the description. Now, one, two technicals going on around here, family. Yeah, but we've managed to get it sorted to be here today. So we give thanks for that. But I'm just making you know that just in case anything does go haywire, we are dealing with some situation around here. All right. So apologies in advance, yeah, for any technicals that may occur. What I'm saying, but we should be okay. But I'm just notifying you just in case. Big up to CPD in the building. Asking, does anyone know the name of the song? I'm assuming that's the song that was in the intro, to the show, and that song, sorry, is called Baka Busi Nengre. Yeah. Baka Baka Busi. Well, there's a few different spellings to be honest, but one of the main ones is Bosie and Nengre, Nen um GRE, yeah, Nengre, all right. And the Bakabushi Nengre, in Jamaican part of we just say Bakabush black man, yeah. What I'm saying? Because the Bakabushi Nengre was a name for a particular group of Maroons, yeah, who were known for resisting against enslavement and colonialism in Suriname, okay. And so that song is from Suriname. It's by a group called Aisasi, AI space sa sa space c isa c, yeah. And it's a song in the Winti tradition. The Winti tradition is a African spiritual retention, which is mainly but not exclusively based in our Akom spiritual system coming out of the Akan people in West Africa, yeah. And so we just love that song there, you know what I'm saying. And all for all the soca lovers out there, Isasi is actually the group that sung the original Faluma song, yeah, that Alison Hines and Square One became known, yeah, famous for singing. It's actually that live version is actually them are singing Suriname, yeah. And the people them love them because they must sing one, song will come from Suriname, basically. All right. So for all the soca lovers, Faluma, the original Faluma, do check it out. It's by the group I Sassy, yeah. And that's also a Winty song. Big up James O. Big up the Meloman, yeah. You know what I'm saying? In the building. You don't know. All right. So we're there, kings and queens. You know what I'm saying? Once again, do feel free to share up the link far and reside. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Enough things for talk about. First and foremost, yeah. I want to send some love to the family of Baba Matulu Shakur. um, and also our brother and elder Akinyele Umoja, yeah, who joined us last week for a tribute to Baba Matulu Shakur. Mojuba, we call this the show um, Matulu Shakur Mojuba. Yeah, Mojuba, spoken in the Yoruba language, simply means to pay homage, yeah, to somebody, yeah, or anything. So it could be a entity, all right, a spirit, yeah. But Mojuba is often a terminology used in reverence to the ancestors. And we call the ancestors' name. We say Mojuba. We honor the ancestors. We pay tribute to them, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we entitled the show that in honor of Baba Matulu Shakur, who passed away on the 6th of July after spending when he was in prison in 1986, yeah, to be more specific. So after, you know, well over 30 years, yeah, behind bars, yeah, as a political prisoner, was released on compassionate leave in December of last year, and passed away in on July the 6th this year. Okay. And so, when someone like that passes away, it's right that we honor them. And so it was just simply correct to dedicate our Zivanayi last week to Baba Matulu Shakur. And I want to encourage ones and ones to watch that show, yeah, and the clips from that show. We've released some clips from the show as well. Watch that conversation. It was a very beautiful conversation with our brother, elder Baba Akinyele Omoja. And um, I said to him prior to the interview that I wanted to pitch the interview at people for people who knew little or nothing about Baba Matulu Shakur. And so that sensibility was the one that dominated the line of questioning. And so it's designed for people to learn about this man, his life, and the organizations that he was a part of and the work that he did. And Baba Akinyele did a beautiful job in breaking that down for us. And so I want to encourage everybody, yeah, everybody. Once that show you're done, if you go check out that there show there, all right, feel free to do that, kings and queens, and take in, the knowledge and the information. There's not the details of Baba Matulu's homegoing ceremony have not been shared yet. And so once they are shared, I would definitely um share them with the family, yeah. For those who want to, and there's a possibility that there may be a live stream as well. So I would definitely share that with the masses, our massive and crew, and we can tune in, yeah. All right, forgive me if I'm looking down a lot, family, but I've got my computer devices and checking everything in front of me, which is again a different vibration to what I normally got going on. All right, so yeah, prior to that, family, the week before I was not here. The reason why I was not here is because took the Empress for God say Miss Joe Scott, you know what I'm saying, and she was beautiful and amazing and exquisite and dynamic and all of the things that you expect from Joe Scott, you know what I mean? But it's the first time I see her live. I love Jill Scott from, me a teenager, but every time she come here, something keep me away from go see her. And so this time I was, definitely able to go see her with my queen and my sister in. And you know what I mean? So yeah, that just had to happen, family. You know what I mean? I was trying to organize to come and do the show another day, but it wasn't possible. So we give thanks for that, you know what I'm saying? And as them say, keep love new and all of these things. All right. So yeah, family. I didn't even check if everybody can hear me, but I'm assuming that you can because nobody else them can hear me. So we're going to go through. I'm gonna share the link shortly, but let me share the link now before we start talk. Yeah. And so this is the link to join live. Yeah, we're just gonna spread it to everywhere where people are watching from right now. Join. Yeah, give me a 2 second. All right. So if you want to come live, if you've got a talking point to raise, feel free to do so. Before I get into what I was going to talk about, CPD has said this: too many falsehoods are circulating like wildfire in the conscious community. Many Black Americans have become anti-African more than ever before. you see in the FBA and many other new age ideas. Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah, you know, these are things that we have discussed before and engaged in discussion on various social media platforms, and it's just real, you know. It's not without cause, you know. It's not an accident, yeah. You know, the identification with and of and for an African identity presents challenges for the geopolitical order as we know it, yeah. And so, as and where that is a reality, the geopolitical order as we know it is going to organize ways and means to negate and neutralize the impact and the effectiveness of the African identity, the power potential of an African identity being able to shed the oppressive yoke, yeah, of global white supremacy, Western imperialism. Okay. And so, yeah, and then there are many Africans who are more than willing, yeah, to be agents of that agenda, especially those of us who live in the West. Yeah, there's many goodies over here that are enticing us, yeah, and encouraging us to negate our African liberation orientation for the sake of, you know, getting a better crumb for from the master's table, so to speak, absorbing ourselves within the imperialist empire and becoming a part of it to the detriment of those of our brothers and sisters who live on the margins of empire, especially in places like Africa and the Caribbean. And so this is why we do what we do here, you know what I'm saying, to raise awareness, to challenge a lot of the distortions, misinformation that is being spread. Because the only way that an agenda such as that can be successful is through the spreading of misinformation and disinformation. Yeah. Particularly about Africa, Africanness, African people, Pan Africanism, African centered ideas. Yeah. And you will notice that there is a no shortage of caricatures that are out there that are well cultivated and designed for people to respond to in terms of how they see, view, and relate to the Black nationalist, Pan Africanist, African centered energy that exists among and within the African world community. Yeah. At the same time, let us not be in despair, in a state of despair, because there are many brothers and sisters in the United States of America, the UK, throughout the Caribbean, throughout the continent, and many other places, yeah, you know, on planet Earth, who are affirming and impassioned by the African identity and a political agenda that is centered around fulfilling the power potential of the African identity family. All right. So I never live in despair, even though my revolutionary optimism is constantly challenged. Yeah, we have to have revolutionary optimism to be able to do the work that we do. And stay tuned, because through gotkushTV, we're going to be making sure that we ensure to share the work that is taking place in our global African community. All right. That is the purpose for which we are here. And so the month of Messiah is approaching. 31 days of observing and rededication to the legacy of the most eminent prophet, His Excellency Marcus Messiah Garvey, and the UNIA ACL, of which I am a member. And in line with that, I have the honor of being the keynote speaker at the upcoming Mosiah opening ceremony. The Mosiah opening ceremony taking place on the 6th of the month we call Mosiah. Yeah, from 12 p.m. In Chestnuts Community Centre, which is in North London, Tottenham. And yeah, it's a day of, it's a ceremony, you know what I'm saying? So there's gonna be, you know, chanting, ritualizing, and them kind of things going on, as well as educational elements, performances. And I have the honor of delivering the keynote address, and the keynote address will be on the subject of scientific Garveyism, a working idealism for the 21st century and beyond. Scientific Garveyism, a working idealism for the 21st century and beyond. We're going to be looking at the philosophy and working idealism, as we say, of universal African nationalism. Yes. African fundamentalism, which is the ideology and basic principles of the ideology of the UNIA and Marcus Mosiah under the leadership of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and looking at it in a scientific way as a problem solving theory and practice for African people in the 21st century and beyond. All right, we're going to be breaking that down on that day, and I have the pleasure and the honor of being in the hot seat, yeah, for such an endeavor. May I look forward to it. It's a new come true, kings and queens. For more information, as you see here, alkebulan.org. Alkebulan.org is the place to go if you want to know. Yeah, alkebulan.org. And if you want to get straight there, it's alkebulan/Mosiah. Alkebulan/Mosiah is the place to go. Okay. All right. Let me pay more attention to the chat. Trigger Happy says revolutionary optimism is actually practical because with no optimism, there is no driving force behind anything. Pessimism makes you do nothing. Yeah, I agree, my brother or my sister. We don't want any forces that cause us to be paralyzed. Yeah, and this kind of relates to what I wanted to speak about today still, because there's a lot going on in the world in relation to the topic of history. Yeah, the topic of history and the importance of history and the extent to which we should engage in explorations and analysis of history. I live, as Onono, in what is referred to as the United Kingdom of Great Britain. All right. And for a number of years now, under the uh, agenda of the restoration of British values, this is talk that's been going on for the last 20 odd years. Yeah, remember them talk there under Tony Blair, yeah, who was elected in 1997, and in the latter half of his premiership as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, there was a lot of talk about restoring British values because the idea that British values had taken a knock somehow, yeah, and were not being promoted in British society. And in with that, the, in that context, uh, activism has continued within the UK and within the Caribbean and the continent, yeah, and throughout the Americas for that matter. And the issue of reparatory justice in relation to the Ma'afa. When we say the Ma'afa, that's a Kiswahili terminology, which has been popularized by Mama Marimba Ani, and it simply means the great disaster. Yes, and we're referring to here the invasion of our lands, peoples, communities, the conquest of our lands, peoples, communities, and nations, the enslavement of the same, and the colonization of the same. It's very important that we understand this terminology, ma'afa. Yeah. Bear it in mind, and the point to emphasize here is that when we refer to ma'afa, we are not just referring to slavery, the transatlantic slave trade. We're referring to invasion, conquest, kidnapping, enslavement, and all that came with enslavement, including all of the rape, all of the torture, colonization, and neocolonization. All right, that's what we're referring to. All of those things brings us right up to the present. We're now just talk about slavery, the transatlantic so-called slave trade. Okay. And since CARICOM, the Caribbean community, the political entity known as the Caribbean community, heads of state have got together and began to petition for reparations, reparatory justice in relation to the horrors of enslavement and colonialism and the underdevelopment that has persisted in the Caribbean as a result. British society has organized itself in order to engage the historical question, in order to negate the viability and the legitimacy of reparatory justice in relation to African people. And true to form, American society has done and is doing the same thing. Yeah. And I've said before, another day we're going to go into the existence of think tanks as political institutions that are designed to influence public opinion and affect public policy. Okay. And I mentioned that now in passing just to say that when you hear a lot of the same talking points being projected in the media in particular, picked up by populations and repeated constantly on social media, understand that often this is not an accident. This is a very deliberate process that is engaged by political think tanks, people that sit down and just discuss policy and ideas and how these policies and ideas should be disseminated, dispensed, and effected. Yeah. And they're very good, yes, at the jobs that they do. All right. And there is symbiotic relationship between the think tanks as they exist in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and the think tanks as they exist in the United States of America, partly because they have the same origin, down to the same individual in some instances. Okay, Kangol, I see you, Masoon come. Yeah, the link is in the description, family. Yeah, sorry, the link is in the chat if you want to join the panel. Yes, and hold a conversation with the eye. Feel free to come and do so. And you can either speak to the points that I'm raising or raise your own points. It's all well and good. Yeah. And one brother has just decided to do so. And so we're going to come to him very soon, kings and queens. All right. We're not itch the thing. That's why, deal with that subject here. And if you're watching on gotkushTV live, you will find the link at the top here, pinned at the top of the chat. All right. Yeah. So what was I on this thing now? Yeah. So yeah, the think tanks, they're very linked to each other. And so a lot of the same talking points are developed and dispensed in similar kinds of ways as far as the UK and the USA is concerned. And both these nations at the moment are dealing with the rising force and cry of Africans within and around their nations and political axis in relation to the subject of reparatory justice. Yeah. And so those of us who speak on these issues often will find our social media pages flooded, as I've been experiencing recently. Yeah, with random European individuals, yeah, who repeat the same talking points. All right, them have the same argument, all of them. And some of these individuals are real people, and some of them are CIA and FBI and MI6 and MI5 bots. Yeah, we have to know that. All right. So there's been some talk about reparations in the UK recently, and There's been some talk about reparations in the US recently. And a lot of this is revolving around how you read the history. In order to negate and neutralize the just call for reparatory justice, and it is a just call, a very just call, yes. And it's a just call whether they are going to submit to the justice of that call or not. What I mean by that is the justness of the call is not dependent upon the logistics of whether they are going to engage in it or not. Yeah. The justice of the call stands alone. The justice of the call stands alone. But the idea now is in Britain, the call is in the restoration of British values. We need to speak about the good of the British Empire. This is what is being said. Yes. We focus too much on the bad, and the British do not want anymore to feel ashamed of the British Empire. They want to feel proud of it. And so we must feel good about the British Empire and what it gave to the world. Yeah, and this has been a talking point for, I'd say, about 2 decades, but intensified over the last decade in the UK. All right. And we're seeing a similar thing in the United States of America. Again, been a good talking point for the last decade at least, and intensified over the last, I'd say, 5 years. Yeah. Where we're seeing now, America wants to talk about the good. Yeah. Not just of American empire, but specifically as it relates to the enslavement of African people, as it relates to the genocide, yes, that was committed against the indigenous peoples of North America, of the Americas in general, but in this instance, because we're focusing on the United States, we're going to say North America. All right. So recently, there's been a literal politician, Senator Ron DeSantis, yeah, in Florida, and they've been commissioning a rewriting of the curriculum to engage in the teaching of history in ways that valorize America and teach the positive. Yeah. And one of the main talking points that has come out of this is the benefits that Africans got from slavery. It's the idea that Africans were taught viable trades, which became useful to us following slavery. So if I'm not for slavery, would I never learn how to be blacksmith and carpenter, and all of these things. Yeah. These are the talking points that are going on at the moment, and we don't have time to figure out all of the levels and the details of the argumentation today. The main point that I want to highlight just right now, yeah, and this is not limiting it to anything we're on the one raise later on in the conversation, is the fact that on the one hand, when we discuss and begin to analyze, yeah, the history, one of the major talking points is get over it. That's been a long-standing talking point. It's history. Yes. Why are you focusing so much on history? Yeah. And they say things like slavery ended hundreds of years ago, which is not the case. Slavery ended just over 100 years ago, as in the formal transatlantic enslavement process. All right. It's just over 100 years ago that it was apparently abolished. Okay. Followed directly by a colonial process. All right, which is important in terms of the definition of ma'afa. But the same people who say get over it, why are we focusing on history, are fundamentally engaged with history and attempting to tell it in ways that shore up and establish and maintain their own power systems. Give me 1 second. So we see that the issue is not the exploration of history. These people are very, very interested in the exploration of history as long as it suits the maintenance of white power. And they're concerned that when the people who have been colonized in the interest of white power begin to write history for ourselves, that historical analysis will create an environment that delegitimizes Fidem power. That's what they're concerned about. All right. And so to close my longer than expected ramblings this evening, I want to read two quotations. Yeah. From the most honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Because we are lead up to the month of Mosiah today. Yeah. And the first, both are quoted in this book, Race First, yeah, by Baba Tony Martin. And the first says this, it's on history. And the second will be on propaganda. It says you assume a right to write history within the last 500 years, and simply because you have been able to dump so many tons of your history in the world and other people have not said anything by way of complaint, you think your history rests there. But a lot of things your Mr. Wells has said, we Negroes treat as bunk. Here he's referring to noted writer H.G. Wells. He's responding to certain things that H.G. Wells said. Yeah. Um. Where am I at? H.G. Wells may divert civilization for the benefit of his Anglo-Saxon group, but that does not make it the fact that the people who laid claim to the civilization he attributed to others are going to give it up easily. The black man knows his past. It is a past of which he can be nobly proud. That is why I stand before you this afternoon, a proud black man who would be nothing else in God's creation but a black man. All right? That's one quotation from the most honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And the second one that I want to read is this one. Papa Garvey says, the great white man has succeeded in subduing the world by forcing everybody to think his way. From his God to his fireside, he has given to the world from his Bible to his yellow newspaper sheet a literature that establishes his right and sovereignty to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race. His right and sovereignty to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race. The white man's propaganda has made him the master of the world. And all those who have come in contact with it and accepted it have become his slave. The Universal Negro Improvement Association is now calling upon 400 million members of our race to discard the psychology and propaganda of all other peoples and to advance our own. The white man has taught that the best of the world was intended for him, and now we teach that all the beauties of creation are the black man's, and he is heir to all that God has given to man. So this last one in particular is very instructive, yeah, because we have to just appreciate love the fact that when Papa Garvey says that we must discard the psychology and propaganda of all other peoples in Message to the People, the course of African philosophy, he has a chapter on propaganda, and he talks about history as propaganda. Yeah. So when we discard the colonizer's history, we are discarding the colonizer's propaganda. And in doing so, the colonizer understands that we are challenging his rights and sovereignty over the world to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race. That is all that is taking place at the moment, family. Yeah. It's not even, so they will lie. Yes. The issue for them is not the truth or the non-truth. The issue for them is having a history that establishes freedom, right, and sovereignty to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race. And in particular, in this instance, the African race. I'm going to pause there, kings and queens. I'm going to bring through the brothers who have clicked the link to come through. The link is in the chat, family. The link is in the chat. If you want to come through, join the chat. You are invited. You are invited. You are invited. As when we're in Ghana, you know, and we sit down and I eat some food, somebody walk past, and you know what I mean? You know, you say you are invited, means you can come and take part in the dining experience. You can come take piece of the food. You're invited, you know what I mean? So kings and queens, you're invited. Yeah. And I'm gonna bring through the brother Kangol, PI right here now, and also the brother Set Imhotep. Yeah. So as said, my brothers, you can feel free to contribute to the talking points that I have raised this evening, or feel free to raise your own, and we will try to engage them within reason. And brothers and sisters, I've received your criticisms of I, in relation to how I facilitate the panel. Yeah, so I'm gonna do my best. Yeah, to make sure that everybody and all the people them talking points, what's the word? Equally heard or sufficiently. There's equity in the distribution of the panel and the talking points that are raised in terms of how and the extent to which they are discussed on the panel. All right. So more, you know what I mean? I listen to Uno and we're gonna try, work it out. So in order of appearance, greetings, Kangol. What you say?
Chinamori. I would have
Don't
first
worry.
off, I would have first off, I said I apologize for my behavior the first time I was on here. It's just the bald head was like he was making me laugh, man. I was like, what is this dude talking about? Like it was crazy. So
I hear
like
you.
I just want to apologize for my behavior.
You, you,
But
you and Set Imhotep are very humble, because me, I gotta tell you, there was nothing that you need to apologize for. And on that same show, Set Imhotep apologized as well. Me don't know what I'm to Uno, yeah. Everybody was supposed to apologize, now apologize, and everybody would don't need to apologize, I apologize, yeah. But my brother, I didn't take nothing that you did was disruptive, yeah, at all. And I didn't feel disrespected by anything. If there was anything, I would have told you and addressed it on the show. So, but I appreciate your words same way. All right, blessings.
um, thank you very much. I feel so much better now. But I want to ask, because we're all descendants of enslaved Africans, right? And
Mm.
I've seriously been thinking about this for the longest. Do you think that other um, black people who were descendants of enslaved Africans or kind of put other black people in danger because when we say things like we have a um, we have a right to be in Britain, we have a right to be in America because we're British or American citizens, and we know that people that a segment of people of European descent say to us all the time, you don't belong in England, you don't
Mm,
belong in America, y'all need
mm,
to get up out of here. So, do you
mm,
think that that's a dangerous mentality for us to have because they keep telling us we
yeah.
don't want you here? Like
Mm,
like our ancestors, like mine, was um
mm,
was only brought to America to work. Now we're not slaves anymore, and they want us out of here. You
mm,
know, your ancestors similar, the same story. You know what I'm saying?
mm, mm,
So,
mm.
do you think that's a dangerous mentality for us to have?
It, okay, it's a beautiful question. I am sympathetic to the idea that we have a right. Yeah. Um, I'm sympathetic. I never rubbish the idea because of the fact that I think there's legitimacy to it in terms of the labor and so on and so forth. The danger for me is not in terms of the residency, right? The danger for me is in terms of the allegiance. Yeah. I don't think, I don't believe the idea that we have a right is putting us in danger. I believe that we are already in danger. And we're not only in danger in America, Britain, France, Portugal, Belgium, Germany. We're in danger in Congo, Jamaica, Haiti, South Africa, Nigeria, Sudan, Somalia, right? You know what I'm saying? Because of the fact that neocolonialism, even where we are a majority, the Western imperialist domination still exists. It's the reason why we have so much high levels of war, high levels of poverty, yeah, um, high levels of underdevelopment, and so on and so forth. And so, danger is a fact of Black life. So, I wouldn't say that the statement causes the danger. The danger that it does cause, however, is for us to be in allegiance to the system of oppression, the imperialist system, as opposed to allegiance to our own interests. Yeah. So there is an idea we have a right because we are citizens. And some people that say that are just saying, listen, we're citizens of the country, therefore our civil and human rights should be respected. Yes. Then there are some people who are saying we are citizens of the country and we want to be just as much a part of the country as everybody else. Yeah. Those are two different statements in my consciousness. Yeah. The second one is we want to be just as British as the British, just as French as the French, just as American as the American. And so when America goes to war and Britain goes to war and French goes to war, we believe in the British and the French and the American project just as much as the white man. And so we want the spoils of that warfare. We want to partake in the spoils of American imperialism, French imperialism, British imperialism, as much as everybody else in America, Britain, and France. I'm just using those three nations as an example. Yeah. So I think and so that sensibility, the danger that it places on us will be felt more, in my humble estimation, in places like Africa and the Caribbean, that it's going to be felt by Africans in Britain and America. Although I agree with you, there is no guarantee that fire is not going to come back to bite us, even those of us who live in the imperialist nation state in the long run. That makes sense. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, it does because it's very like I mean I used to be like you like sympathetic to where we have rights to be in the respective colonies, but the thing that just kills me is that we weren't brought to be citizens of the nations who
No,
captured.
I agree, my brother. I agree. The difficulty is that when we go back home, we're going to face some of the same problems and even worse. Yeah. Whenever I go to Africa and the Caribbean, it becomes very obvious. Yeah. Especially with my Western experience, it becomes very obvious that in order to develop, we are going to have to challenge global geopolitical systems. Yes. And institutions. That's just the nature of things. Yeah. There is no way that we develop from where we are at the moment without having to negate and challenge and stand in the way of the actual geopolitical order as it currently exists. So there's no safe haven. There's nowhere for us to run. There is no Zion. Yeah, Zion don't exist. Right, I know. Yeah. And in as much as it is, it is, and I'm not even, we're not even promoting the terminology Zion right about now. But in as much as any safe haven for African people is going to exist, it's going to exist to the degree that we build it and to the degree that we develop it. Yeah. So yeah, I hope that engages you, my brother. I'm gonna go on to say in my tip just to share the love little piece. I'll come back to you in a second. And as I do so, I'm gonna bring through coffee. Through, you know what I'm saying, as well. So coffee is here. Got you set in my tip. Good to see you again, King.
Peace, 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 everybody. Peace and African power to everybody under the sound of my voice. But can I be clearly heard to begin?
Yes, sir, you can.
But first things first, today I realized how much I really what an important place Zivanayi has in my life. I kind of forgot that today was Tuesday.
Okay.
And so I was up in San Juan, drinking, smoking with a session of mine. Catch the time, realize, hey, I had a press. Zivanayi about to start. You understand? So I had to run, hurry, home and take a water and jump on, right? I wanted to address it. I wanted to address something that you had mentioned a little bit earlier, like why these pilgrims and I'm asking us why we so hung up on our history in our boy. And it's like I hung up on our history because the capital that they gained during the transatlantic enslavement period, they never redistributed back to us. You understand? I hung up on our history because I never get to learn from birth my ancestral language or my ancestral spiritual or philosophical system. You dig? I hung up on our history because in my little country here, about half the land is owned by the crown. You understand? I hung up on our history because these pilsens that I try not to be too rude, too crude, but these pilsens and I'm love to say that we never had no civilization in Africa now, boy. You understand? We never had no civilization before, and we don't have none now. So I love to cite the Baba Robin Walker for them. You dig? And I hung up on our history because their history is taught in schools. I grew up in the Caribbean, at the very bottom of the Caribbean, just above Venezuela, right? Why am I learning about English colonial history, not colonial history, imperial history in primary school? You understand? Why is my headmistress an Irish nun from the Sisters of Cluny? You understand what I mean? This little black boy in this Caribbean country at the bottom of the sea, and these people still have the influence across there. I hung up on our history because they never taught it to us. And in order for us to be able to effectively, and I love that you quoted the chapter called Propaganda in Race First, because that was the first time I actually got introduced to the idea that propaganda is not inherently negative, But in order for us to be able to effectively counteract their propaganda, which we are inculcated with since birth, you have to be able to know our history. So I'm not necessarily hung up on our history as though it shouldn't be strange that I'm interested in my history. It's only strange because they never taught it to me. If I learned it from birth, I wouldn't have been hung up on it. It would have just been my cultural heritage, my cultural inheritance.
100%. Yeah. The fact is, to call yourself a people of any kind, ethnicity, nation, race, whatever it is, it's based upon a historical understanding. Yeah. So it's natural. And it's
microphone low.
Whose microphone's low?
Yours.
Is my microphone low? Oh, no, can't hear, right?
I mean, we can hear you, but I suppose in comparison to Coffee, how he just sounded, and maybe in comparison to me, you do sound a little softer. No, I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying to be.
No. I know you know. But usually people tell me say my mic well hot. So, is that better? So the whole time I thought the mic low and the people them can't hear I good.
Nah, I'm fairly certain before either Brother Kangal and myself started speaking, it would have been at an audible volume. It's okay.
Okay, all right, cool. I'll try to project as well, yeah. So So when the people them say no, they want restore Britishness and British values and all them thing there. This is a historical conversation. When them say they want to teach the good about the British Empire, this is a historical conversation. But suddenly, when the colonized want to talk about the British Empire, history becomes irrelevant. Right? Why are you focusing on the past? Yeah, and it's these duplicitous arguments exist in the same space at the same time because they serve the same interest. Is the essential point. And me go Ghana, me go Ghana 2021 to write it, yeah. And I went to the ancestral wall in Pram Pram, just on the outskirts of Accra. Yeah, big up to my mama Marimba Annie who I met out there. And all the brothers and sisters who are involved in maintaining the ancestral wall. So we was doing the wall tour, and it's an ancestral wall. So you got different murals of different ancestors got through all of the place. Yeah, I've got a video showing my journey on my personal channel, ShakaRa Speaks. Yeah, and the elder said to us, yeah, one of the things that they do is they receive visits from schools. Yeah, and a brethren said to him that his children, there's a particular ancestor whose name slips me right about now, but she was important because she resisted enslavement, yeah, and colonization on the continent. And many of us are not aware, especially with this rewriting of the history now. The narrative that they give us is that Africans began, this is literally what they're saying, began the so-called slave trade because of them sell the people them, yeah, Rani. You will never see that Africans fought against the Europeans when they came, all right, which is a fact. Yeah, this particular ancestor, a female ancestor whose name I'm forgetting at the moment, a lot of the students, most of them, in fact, all of them, have never heard of her, but they are taught in their school about the Great Fire of London. Yeah, he said that it wasn't cool. The other said he had to coach his children through having to write an essay for their schooling on the Great Fire of London. And it's like, why is this in the curriculum of for a school in Ghana? Like, why is that this particularly important, given the amount of things that are relevant to the pit of them on our history that are not present, yeah, right, on the curriculum? What's that about? Yeah, so it's a contradiction, and people don't realize the extent to which education curriculums, especially in relation to history, but all subjects, because when you really check it, all subjects are history. Yeah, you're learning the history of the subject, whenever you're studying any subject. The extent to which, even in majority Black nations, the education system is still very colonial. Yeah, so give thanks to Timotep for confirming that in the present. We're now talking about 1960 and them blow all there. We're talking about right here now. Yeah. And all these things. Give thanks, King. I'm going to come back around to you. We're going to go to coffee, and I'm bringing through Black history on the channel now also. So Black history on here. Yeah, feel free to keep your camera off, but turn it on if you so wish. Got through coffee.
Yeah, man. Greetings, all comrades on the panel and in the chat. In the name of the working
Greetings,
class
comrade.
revolution. Yeah, man. So we're talking about what? Development. I hear you mention development, and I hear you mention curriculum. Yeah. But we all know that these terms have different meanings to different people. You know what I mean? What education look like to some people is not what it look like to other people, and the same thing with development. So which is ironic since most people like Kangal and you and Imhotep don't like the free market solution to problems and prefer the state to deal with it. But the more state have a control over education, is the more you're going to have these kind of back and forth, because the public school is a public good, right? No one faction should be able to control it in a democracy. So you're going to always have fights over curriculum. But you mentioned development. I want to hear from everybody on the panel how them define development and what are the measures they will use to judge whether development is taking place.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think.
I-
Go on, brother. Sorry,
Or
before you go, the conversation about development was around the in the context of history, yeah, which is about the connection between the underdevelopment of majority black nations and communities and enslavement and colonialism, yeah. Um, so that was the context in which development was talked about, and the extent to which the development in the imperialist nations was contributed to by the enslavement and the uh, colonial process. Yeah, one of the actual aspects of this rewriting of the history that they tried to do is negate and deny uh, the extent to which they benefited from the colonial process and the enslavement process. And if with this rewriting of history, to hear them tell it, you'll be forgiven for coming away thinking that Britain and America and France and all of them suffered as opposed to reap the rewards of their enslavement and colonial process. So yeah, I don't want to get bogged down on the minutia of development because it wasn't relevant necessarily. Well, I shouldn't say it wasn't relevant. It wasn't the central point that I was making, but I can give a generic vibes, yeah, in relation to it. And the foundation of it would be that the means of production are in the hands of the African masses and employed towards the specific benefit of the African masses, that we are organized and have resources at our disposal through which to develop ourselves in every field of human endeavor. That's very, very broad, yeah. But I will say that there's a very good chapter at the beginning of the great, excellent book by the great and excellent and illustrious Baba Walter Rodney that explores different ideals of development and ideas of development. And I think that that chapter is very instructive for the kinds of conversation that we need to be having on development. And maybe we'll host a conversation specifically on that chapter to delve into the weeds of that question. Kango, you want to say something? Go ahead.
okay. First of all, whoever the dude is that's talking, he's trying to sow seeds of deceit. I mean dissent. I'm gonna explain why. Um, I'm not a liberal. That's number one, and I'm not a communist. That's number two. So you could just stop that lie right now. But that's what I want to say. I'm not a communist, and I'm far from a liberal. I'm done.
Hey, let me
So,
chime in though.
so you can hold on a sub. All right, Kangal sidestep the question. All right, next one.
Yeah, let me answer it. So, yeah, good afternoon. So, in my opinion, development, if you look at human history, you don't have to assign it to any philosophy or anything because over time, human beings have developed in terms of standard of living and welfare from Paleolithic to Neolithic to Bronze Age, Iron Age. You know what I mean? So I don't think we need to necessarily dive into the econ that you're about to drag us into. But what I wanted to, I guess, is an observation regarding the whole forget your history type thing. Is like something I observed watching the UFC recently. I don't know if you guys watch the UFC, like with Israel Adesanya, right? Right,
Hey,
yeah.
yes,
So
sir.
So everybody, a lot of the white UFC fans, them seem to go crazy now that Israel and Dricus Duplessis having them little, problems. But within that, they urge people essentially to forget the history of South Africa. They'll even go so far as to say it was a long time ago, right? Even though it was like 1993, which is kind of crazy.
That
But
stuff after
it,
I was born, brother. How that could be long ago? That was after I
ex-
was born.
exactly. So what I observe about it is that the conservatives and those who want to push us to forget our history, right? And say we're too sensitive because we'll observe our history. They themselves will transform and become woke and sensitive, right? When their idea of the history is challenged. So to them, unless a black person is physically assaulted, there's no racism. But if you simply say something that they don't like, it's no racism, right? So it shows that they're very aware and conscious of things like microaggressions and all the different stuff that woke people complain about, but they only identify it or see it when it's against them. You see what I'm saying? But I just thought that was an interesting thing I observed through that
My
whole
brother,
thing.
I don't follow the UFC. Yeah, I am familiar with Israel, because he's very popular on social media, but I don't follow the UFC right like that. But I like your example. You know why? Because it demonstrates how ubiquitous, how all encompassing history is. Because this is UFC. What does that have to do with anything? Even the fact that the region name Israel is historically relevant, right? But the idea that 'cause me
What is
follow the
UFC? What's that?
UFC is the where's that from again?
Ultimate
Ultimate
Fighting Championship.
fighting championship. Yeah.
Ultimate Fighter. It's
Right,
mixed.
that
Yeah,
can
mixed
count
martial
up.
arts. Yeah, mixed martial arts. Yeah, no, but it's a good example. It's a very good example. It's an excellent example. We're gonna bring our next sport now. Yeah, we're gonna bring our next sport now.
I
Me
want to
watch.
chime in on that.
But
Yeah, no,
before
we're,
I get off, only one person answer the question. Why your
no,
emotive
I know, no,
definition?
we're still on the question, but we are dealing with the holistic nature of the conversation right now. All right. So
Ah,
this example here is a very good example, right? So my family is a cricket family. We watch cricket, yeah. And Trinidad just had their first test, yeah, in about 5 years test match against India recently, right? And anybody who know cricket will know that West Indies is arguably the best team in the history, yes, of Test cricket, of cricket in general. But right now we're not doing very well. Yeah. 1 second, let me just bring through Kale. All right. Let me just bring through Kale. Blessings, Kale.
We got
You're
some
trying to
people.
embarrass the rest of these two.
With the what?
You have some you have some echo, so I'm gonna mute if you like a piece, yeah.
All right, King. Cool, cool, cool.
All right. Yeah. All right. So now one of the things that is taking place here is that people are beginning to debate, yeah, a lot of the infrastructure of cricket, because it's very much centered around what them call the big three, yeah, which is India, England, and Australia, yeah. And what happens is that what's happening at the moment is that traditionally teams will play 5 test matches. A test match is a 5-day match, yeah. You play 5 of them, all right. But because there's been a shift in the infrastructure, the only teams, yeah, that play 5 tests nowadays is England and Australia. India every now and then, but that's to do with the history of the cricket sport and this tournament that takes place between England and Australia, which is called the Ashes. And so whatever other changes take place in cricket, you can't touch the Ashes because that is sacred. And they literally use the term sacred. So you can chop not West Indies only play 2 tests against India when traditionally we play at least 3. Anything else can change, but you can't touch the Ashes. And that is based around the history of the relationship between Britain and Australia, yes, which you cannot separate from the imperialism and genocide that was committed against the people, the indigenous people in Australia. Yeah. The second part, one now that we want to bring, my mother, a very big tennis, yeah, follower. So we follow tennis too. And recently, Wimbledon took place in the UK. All right, very, very interesting movements. Yeah, and because these people represent their various different nations. Now, one, and I forget the woman's name, but she walked off. Sorry, she played a match and she won the match. Yeah, she come from Ukraine, and the woman what she a play come from not Russia. I can't remember.
Belarus, I think. Not
Yeah?
Belarus.
Belarus,
Belarus.
and who was she playing? Yeah, but who was she playing?
Yeah.
No, she was playing against the Ukrainian. No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what happened is, but where Belarus come from? Like, was it Belarus? I forget where I go on, but don't worry about it. It will come back to me. Yeah. But basically, this woman who comes from Ukraine, she decides that since the war start, yeah, she not shake nobody on if them come from Russia or one other nation that is allied with Russia. All right. She not, this is completely unsports person like. All right. I've never seen this before. So whenever she's playing somebody from Russia, whether she lose or win, she'll walk off the court. Traditionally, you have to shake the person hand and then shake the umpire and then walk off of the court. Yeah. So we see how the politics and the history, yeah, if affect what go on from the court and the field, yeah, and all of these things. It's a very interesting dynamic. There is no such thing as an apolitical sport and an ahistorical. The history always comes in. The politics always comes in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. Now, what I go? Set Imhotep. Did you have an answer or a response to Coffee's question?
I did. I kind of more.
Yeah, politician now, say yeah, politician now, say yeah.
I think somebody's mic shut on him.
Keo, are you listening?
Are you listening? I'm listening.
But sorry, are you listening? Is your YouTube on?
Hold on. No.
So for some reason you have an echo.
Right.
I'll tell you what. If you can't go out, I'll come back. Give thanks, King. Give thanks.
That's what development look like, speedy access to communication.
Brother, yeah, so we're moving past these, right? I'm more interested in touching on that, let's say that controversy with Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis. But I don't know, in order so that
feel free to do both.
Yeah, don't say in order so that you don't throw a tantrum on the show, regarding development in the context that you brought it up. I think, well, I always come on the panel and usually I have to recommend the book Capitalism and Slavery to the brother Coffee, but it really does give quite a, not necessarily concise, a detailed breakdown by year and by polity, like by city, of how Britain gained and manipulated the capital that they were generating through the free labor of enslaved Africans, and how the industries multiplied as a result of the massive capital injection from the empire. And it's not necessarily only from the Caribbean. Capitalism and slavery does, for the most part, deal with the Caribbean, but obviously their tradings in India and in China that would obviously have helped as well. So in terms of, and it is, okay, so I think Brother ShakaRa started the presentation speaking about the fact that they say, these Pilgrims and I will say that they were able to teach Africans worthwhile trades and that kind of foolishness. And I can't remember which one of our elder master teachers I was listening to, but they kind of disavowed me of that notion very early in my journey into consciousness by saying, how are you going to get some ignorant nobodies to come and run a farm and a plantation and to build and to be engineers and that kind of thing and to be navigators and that sort of thing? The people that they were taking were skilled tradespeople in their own right in the civilizations where they came from, and they manipulated those trades under enslavement when they were enslaved across the Atlantic. So I don't know. I always find it kind of to be honest, quite frustrating when people pretend as though they can't understand why African countries or formerly colonized countries are underdeveloped, when the entire purpose of colonization, not even necessarily in places where Africans are, but the purpose of colonization as a governmental structure is to extract resources from a place and bring it back to the imperial core. That's the entire point of colonization. So the idea, when people say, okay, the infrastructure that was built in these kind of colonies was specifically built to facilitate colonial exploitation. So you will find a lot of port cities in formerly enslaved, a lot of highly developed port cities, like Lagos is a good example in Nigeria.
New York.
Well,
New,
I can't
New
speak to
York.
New York because they would have been a,
No,
they would have,
that is actually a very
same.
good example. Yeah,
It's the
that's a
same
good
when they
example.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a colonial outpost.
when they were massacring the indigenous people, that's one of the first places that they built. You know what I'm saying, on the East Coast.
But you see, I don't think the answer. Look,
You know?
two persons failed to answer the question. One answer it, and
No, sorry,
but
Coffee.
Imhotep,
I asked the question, but sorry, the people that are not
Imhotep,
duty bound and
no,
obligated
okay,
to.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand that,
If
but
they
just
don't
say,
answer, if they don't answer, they don't answer it. You know what I'm saying? That's
all right, let me
So
just.
hold on there. Cut him not done. Finish him, Imhotep. Finish.
Sorry.
I don't know if I remember where I was, but yeah. So yeah, the infrastructure in these formerly colonized places and sometimes presently colonized places were created and were conceptualized for the purpose of fulfilling colonial obligations. So that you will find
100%.
in a lot of the rural areas, you're not seeing the same sort of infrastructural development. You don't see a lot of and because I think it may have been 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago we were speaking about this as well, where we were speaking about the ideology that is governing the ruling parties in a lot of these African countries, the fact that they are neo-colonial and neoliberal in nature, and so they serve the current um, uh, global hegemonic ideological interests is what I wanted. But to be honest, I think I'm finished with coffee. It's much more interesting to get to the to at least for me at least to get to the controversy between Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis, because genesis of that controversy was Dricus du Plessis was asked about. There was a period in time where there were 3 African-born champions in the UFC. So a gentleman named Francis Ngannou, who's from Cameroon and was the heavyweight champion. Israel Adesanya, who is from Nigeria, and was the middleweight champion, and Kamaruddin Usman, who is also from Nigeria and who was the welterweight champion. So they used to call themselves the 3 kings while they were all reigning, right? Because they're in the big boy divisions too, eh? They only miss out one of the big boy divisions, right?
Okay.
And so Dricus, when he had won, after having won a fight, he was asked in a press conference, what does he think about the 3 kings, whatever, in the UFC? And he said, listen, he's the African fighter in the UFC. He born in Africa, he trains in Africa, he breathes African air, and he's going to bring the belt back to Africa. Listen.
Yeah. Okay, Okay, I did see this. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, he breathes African air every day, and he trains in Africa. He's going to bring the belt back to Africa, right? My biggest problem with it is that he was quite unaware of the fact that, number one, Francis Ngannou immediately after winning it took it back to Cameroon. So the idea that the UFC belt has never been to Africa is stupid. And number two, as a South African man, right, of Afrikaner origin, right, to have the unmitigated goal to get on the people's internet, right, to get on Rihanna's internet, to get on Beyonce's internet, and tell you understand, and speak about you are the African fighter in the UFC. You have real goal and you have real ball. And the thing is, so I follow Israel. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm not talking, man. That's a friend way I said. Go
So I follow Israel on his YouTube channel as well, and he actually did an interview with his brother. Is his executive producer, executive director, whatever. Right? So he was doing an interview with him, and Israel basically was like, and Israel kind of have his own little political problems. I don't really align with him. He seemed kind of a little bit Western for my liking, you know. But he was saying, you know, And he was
Go
saying
ahead.
basically, I never discounted you as an African. Yeah, you're born there, you're African, right? But
Mm-hmm.
so this cracker, as he's saying, to
Mm-hmm.
challenge the Africanity basically of Kamaruddin Usman of
Yeah,
Israel Adesanya. You
yeah,
understand? Of Francis Ngannou. A man,
yeah, yeah,
Francis Ngannou is a man who was working in the sand pits in Cameroon and
yeah,
shoveled
yeah.
sand to save money to go to France to train, you know.
Okay,
The
okay, okay.
balls of you to come on the people internet and say that, you understand? So Israel came
Yeah,
back at him. When
yeah.
he won against one of Israel's old nemesis the other day. So Israel got
Okay.
in the cage and he say, yeah, my Africa brother was good nigga, was good nigga, you know, over and over and over and over, boy. And
Yeah,
like I was on Smash Show the other day, he didn't really like that because he feels like Israel is making it that, you know, next thing he lose to Dricus now, that mean that South Africans have the right and these the real Africans now. But I had
yeah,
to,
yeah.
I don't know if he agrees with me, but I had to let him know, nah, like Israel never started it. Regardless, because of what Dricus said, it was always going to be that. Regardless of
Yeah,
however
yeah.
Israel responded, you know?
And that's the thing going on because a lot of that is based upon again a similar situation, right? The manipulation of history that legitimizes, yeah, the right and sovereignty of the Anglo-Boer them in a South Africa, yeah, the Anglo-Saxon and the
Yes.
Boer, yeah, in a South Africa. It's the same thing I go on. So one of the major talking points when them did have over there is when they did come there, the you know, them did the superior expanse of land when nobody never did it. Yeah. And so that's the land that they took. Yeah. Nobody was there, you know, right? You know, nobody that used the land. You know what I mean? It was just empty land, right? You know what I'm saying? With them confined and
But
just
the
taking
people who was living there wasn't nomadic and thing. They wasn't like moving about. The civilizations didn't used to.
some were and others because so there's an agricultural thing in many indigenous African societies whereby you only cultivate a certain amount of land for a certain period of time, yeah, and then you leave it to replenish itself, and you find some next land to go work and all them thing there, right? So when them see the know the land will replenish itself, them feel say empty land, right? You know what I'm saying? Or that's the excuse that they're trying to give, yeah, to legitimize their continued thievery and supremacy in South Africa today.
Would
It's a
that
very
work
interesting
today though?
example.
Them
You know
kind
what I'm
of
saying?
crop rotation kind of thing, like
That works today. What do you mean? Sorry.
would that would that method of farming agriculture work today to feed like 100
Well, yeah,
how much South
it's
Africa
been
50
working.
million?
It's been working for millions of years, my brother. There's no reason why it shouldn't work today.
That's how
You know,
agriculture works, actually. But one more
yeah.
thing, though, Shaka,
Oh,
with regard to
agriculture
the
works meaning
Driscoll's
that
thing.
you don't keep ownership of the land, you just leave it for anybody to come next. Which developed country we can feed millions of people today have that kind of agricultural system?
No, that's
When
the
you
point.
Wait,
necessarily,
Nah man.
wait,
Comrade Melo say, Comrade Melo say, I saw agriculture work.
let me answer him. Let me
Yes,
answer
Go
him.
ahead.
please.
Go ahead.
Okay, but wait first though. Let me contribute first more on the Israel and Driscoll's thing. So, yeah, another complexity with it is that Driscoll uses this idea that he is in Africa to justify his claim that he would be the real African champion, and it got back into the history whereby, according to the history, he is afforded the luxury to stay in South Africa and train. You know what I mean? Whereas the ordinary African, because of the history of colonialism, doesn't have the infrastructure and the facilities to do the same. So
Right.
I find it to just be a very, you know what I mean? It tied together so many things. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
man.
but
Go
to
on,
be fair
true.
though, to be fair, I don't know what Dricus team is like. So I don't know if they have other like let me say native South Africans, either colored, indigenous or Boer or whatever. That might also be training there. So that might be a point that they use against us. But I fully agree with what you're saying so far. Yeah.
Boer is
Interesting.
native.
Yeah,
But yeah,
man. I
got
think he has a couple black people in his team. I think he does.
deal with the agriculture thing,
Oh
brother
yeah.
Joe.
And with regard to agriculture now, I don't know Kofi, if you have family that farm, but you see if you continuously farm the same land, eventually the yields they diminish. I think that's also an economic concept as well about diminishing returns and something like that. I'm not an
So
economist though,
I understand that,
but
but that's
indeed,
different from what
you know.
Shaka was saying. I
No,
understand
No. But watch.
that,
Hold
but
on.
Shaka was saying that
Did you
there was no
understand what I
private
said?
ownership. That's what he was
When
saying.
did he
wasn't
say
sorry.
that?
I wasn't.
No, nobody spoke
Oh,
about
Yeah,
ownership.
hold on, hold on, hold on, hold
Sorry, I
on,
wasn't.
hold on.
Sorry,
Was there private
sorry.
ownership before
No, no, no,
the Dutch and the
no. But
English?
no, there wasn't.
Okay,
But
that may I talk.
sorry. The point was the justification
And
for
the,
colonizing the people them land was that they saw empty land. Yeah.
right.
So the land doesn't have to be privately owned for it to be people land. I don't, like people land doesn't begin with
It's
the concept.
publicly owned.
No.
Private.
And then I say, which developed country that feed
Yeah.
millions do that?
Yes, but
And
brother
him go jump
Coffee,
in and say that is
brother
how
Coffee,
agriculture go.
No,
That's
brother
what him say.
Coffee,
Hold on.
using
There's two things. There's two things. 1 second. There's two things.
Yo,
Right?
play it back on.
It's actually It's actually a major concern in geology at the moment that topsoil is severely malnourished. Yeah.
Exactly.
And the reason why topsoil is severely malnourished is because of industrialized agricultural patterns. Yeah. That do not allow for the sufficient replenishing of land.
But that's not the issue. That's not
No,
the
it is
issue.
the issue.
You
Sorry.
said that
It is the issue.
they farm the land and they leave the land to replenish, right? And then I
Yeah.
said,
For a
which
period of time,
modern which modern industrial country that feed millions of people do that? Leave the land. There's no ownership to the land. Yeah, no private ownership to
What
the land.
that has to do with the conversation?
Sorry.
And then you jump in and say, yeah, so agriculture go.
Let me show. Yeah,
so name the country.
It is how agriculture goes.
Name the country that do that.
No, you don't have to name the country. We're talking about nature. Nature.
Yes, I say.
Right? Countries. Listen carefully.
Well, you don't.
It's a very simple point. The point is that the industrialized countries that you're talking
about
are the ones responsible for the malnourishing of the soil. That's the point that is being made. It's an actual problem at the moment that people are trying to solve. Yeah.
So how did diet and population explode?
Excuse me. Thank you. One of the it's part of it is not just keep the repeated usage of the land. It's the repeated usage of the land to grow one crop. Yeah. So whereas African and other indigenous peoples tend to have what they call polycrop, what they refer to as polycrop agricultural system, where you're growing more than one crop on land. Monocrop tends to deplete the nutrients in the soil. Okay, so these are issues that these industrialized countries that you're referring to at the moment are trying to solve at the moment, because of the fact that their agricultural programs to this point have contributed.
That's a different thing. I ask you how using a pre-colonial agricultural model in South Africa going to feed over 50 million people.
Sorry, you do realize though that when I was speaking, I was not making the argument.
No, not you. It's comrade. A comrade.
No one was, but I wasn't either. I wasn't either.
No, you did say I saw agriculture go. That's what you said.
Yes.
Wasn't me. Yes, because that's
which country? Which country?
No, he said he did.
Can you listen?
That is
okay, go on. I'm listening now. Hold on. Which country?
No.
Can you calm down as well?
Stop. The issue when he said
make him get to it, man. Yeah, make him get.
I didn't know that anybody was under threat of being captured from taking. I forget to it, but in any case, the point was not about countries. The point was about the craft of agriculture. Yes, and so the idea is that soil needs to be replenished. That's it. Yeah, that's the only thing.
But that's not the issue.
Hold on. It is, but you never raised the issue. So how are you going to define what the issue is?
All right. Let me ask the question simple. Can we use? Right.
So no,
are you suggesting that we got to a model?
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Let me answer the question first, and maybe I might not need to ask the question that you
All
about
right.
answer,
Here we
right?
go. Here we go.
In the first place, the premise, one of the main premises of your question is kind of dumb, because you're asking about
Oh, come
agricultural
on.
practice. You're asking about a pre-colonial
Oh,
agricultural.
you have to do that.
You're asking about a pre-colonial agricultural practice and asking about whether any post-colonial developed, so-called developed industrial countries are using that method, right? No country which uses that method would be defined as developed or industrial in the first place. So the premise of the question is kind of dumb, right? In the second place, I
No.
don't know.
Oh, dude, I'm simply asking. ShakaRa didn't mention a method of agriculture that predated the European.
Yeah, but he only mentioned
right?
it in the
So I'm
context.
just
He only
asking,
mentioned it.
in the
Yeah, but
interest
okay.
of development, since we're not just talking, we're talking for a purpose, right? There must be
He
an
wasn't
aim of
talking
all of
about
this.
development.
But
So
yeah, but you're taking us
yeah,
away
but
from the purpose that we were on. And what I'm saying is the
also, we're
context in
not
which
dealing with African development.
the context in
We're not
which
dealing with African
the
development.
context in which Brother Shaka brought up the fact that there was agriculture going on in the land is as an example of why the Anglo Boers decided that this land was being unoccupied and therefore that they could claim it. He was only saying that the only reason it may have been unoccupied is because of the type of agriculture that was being used
and I'm
at that point in
asking,
time.
and I'm
I have
asking,
an
can we
interesting,
go back to
interesting
that
point. I have an
method? Yes or
interesting
no?
point.
I didn't hear what you
I have
said.
an interesting point regarding this.
You go
Like
ahead.
Kofi, what you seem to be suggesting is to justify them taking the land because they would implement
Yo, you and
better
your foolishness
agricultural
now.
practice.
Hold just
on, though.
because you can't answer the
That is the
question, you
effect
come
of
say
what
me
they're
justify
saying.
colonialism.
No, but let's have a
finish.
discussion.
Let the man finish.
Let's have a discussion. Yeah. So it's basically a justification for them stealing the land, right? And it flows very nicely with the idea that we benefited from slavery. So you see, I'm going to tie you back into the topic now, right? And this is another interesting thing, like
allow
what
me to
Seth
address that.
Imhotep was talking about.
Yeah.
So the thing about the whole idea that we benefit from them capturing our land is very ridiculous because we could benefit from technological advancement without being enslaved. It's called trade. You know, you could trade with me and exchange research ideas without enslaving me or stealing my land. You know, it's very simple.
Okay,
So
simple.
there you go.
Yes,
Right.
Well, I'm glad you concede. I'm glad you concede that and also agriculture got to them. Because I saw you that try
So in the first place, I don't know that is what was said.
Primitive method.
It's not sorry. Pause for a sec. Pause for a sec. Because I'm not even gonna go around in circles on that. It's just silly at this point, right? You know what I'm saying? I think where everybody else on the panel, and I'm sure most of the listening audience understood what now African herdsman meant, yeah, when he said, I saw agriculture go. Yeah, you have to replenish the land. Yeah, that's a principle within agriculture. Okay.
No, he said it in the context of today's world and how effective that is in feeding over 50
That's a lie. That's a lie. Stop lying on me.
He was talking in the context.
So hold on there.
Sorry. Excuse me. Coffee. Excuse me. He was talking in the context of the soil. Yes. And where you have to do with the soil.
Yeah, man. That's all the socialist.
That's what it was. That's
slippery.
You know,
well slippery. No,
if that's what you're saying. If that's what you're saying.
Alright,
if we went Isley,
so comrade Isley mentioned.
If we went Isley, it's because the US and the British military go all around the world and thief the Isle. So we have plenty for put on, you know what I'm saying? And lubricate and all everything there. But
did I hear Comrade Melloman endorse trade?
Hold on. Let me just say this. Because Melloman, African herdsman, brought it very nicely round to the point, right? In terms of history, yeah, and how the history is used, yeah, to establish the right and sovereignty of the white man to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race, yeah, because in reality, what was taking place in these nations, yeah, and this comes back to the subject of development quite nicely as well, because one of the major indicators of development, in my humble estimation, is food, clothing, and shelter. Yeah, common needs, basic needs, food, clothing, and shelter.
You're the only man who answer the question. Everybody run from it.
Well, I appreciate your acknowledgement, but nobody else is required to answer the question. In fact,
True.
Right. So if them choose to answer your question, it's a privilege to you. All right. You know what I'm saying?
All them want to do is talk about greed, African history, but no purpose to it.
No, well, if you don't see the purpose, then that's fine. But I certainly see the purpose in what the man must say, and I appreciate it. Yeah. So one of the things that was taking place is in a nation, by the way, that was able to feed itself, yeah, for a number of years, despite sanctions from the US and Britain in particular, is Zimbabwe, yeah, and that was facilitated for the most part using indigenous agricultural methodologies, yeah. Look it up. Right?
No, they were feeding themselves before the sanctions.
That's relevant.
They were feeding themselves before the sanctions.
I'm not sure why that would be relevant. I'm not sure why that would be relevant. The point that's being made is that the sanctions were impeding trade. Yeah, so they were unable to get food sources. So the fact that they were able to feed themselves with the sanctions is actually a testament to the effectiveness of their agriculture. Is the point that was being made. All right. But the point here is that when we talk about colonialism and the extraction of resources, yeah, not resources, sorry, nutrients from land, one of the things that was facilitating this is the fact that the most arable land in many colonial nations was being used to produce cash crops, yeah, for the colonizer. All right. And not to feed the people in the nation. And so significant levels of poverty, malnourishment, and so on and so forth were facilitated as a result, yeah, of that economic policy.
Yeah, but there's nuance to that because those indicators did improve.
Excuse me, thank you. That also affected the nutrients in the soil, because the idea was to reap as much cash crops as possible. Therefore, monocrop agricultural systems were imposed upon people that didn't traditionally have a monocrop agricultural system, and that was even worsened in places like Zimbabwe, where a significant amount of land was used to grow things like tobacco. And tobacco, you know about tobacco, African herdsman?
Yeah, them grow it in a Portland.
Primitive crop rotation.
Them grow it up a Portland. Allow me to speak for myself.
Yeah, are you familiar with the impact that it has on soil?
Not entirely, no.
Okay, because apparently I've heard from people that as far as sucking the nutrients from soil, tobacco is one of the things that does that the most. Yeah, it's one of the worst culprits. Yeah, in that regard. Yeah, so once you grow a certain amount of tobacco over a period of time, that land becomes unusable for a long time. Yeah, it sucks up the nutrients very, very quickly. And so that was the reality in a number of African and Caribbean nations. Yeah, and this has affected development, because land is now not as arable as it used to be, and because of the neo-colonial process, the people's access to land and being able to access land for the benefit of ourselves has not been sufficiently remedied. So one of the areas of development, in my humble estimation, is the addressing access to land, food, clothing, and shelter. And when a sufficient number of people are fed, clothed, sheltered, and in my humble estimation, the goal should be to eradicate poverty in that regard, I would consider that to be a road towards development as well, and a key indicator.
All right, let me answer. Let me just address that. The white farmers was a scapegoat for the Mugabe regime. Yeah, they were feeding them. The reason why Zimbabwe economy was underdeveloped is not because of the pork on the white farmers. It's because of the excessive state control of Mugabe. Yeah, they because remember, I said Mugabe was a Marxist. Next door in Tanzania, they didn't have white farmers mashing up the land with tobacco as you portrayed, right? They had, and the land wasn't in the hands of the market. The land was in the hands of the state because, as you imply, the state knows what's best, how to put land to use. Yeah, and that system of Stalinist collectivization in Tanzania was known as Ujamaa. He give it a nice sounding authentic African name, but it was the same Marxist program. Yeah, and it was an utter failure, despite Tanzania and Nigeria getting tons and tons of foreign aid. It was still a failure. So I don't think that the problem in Southern
Brother
Africa.
Coffee, are you of the opinion that the current method of land distribution under the capitalist system is equitable or just?
All right. So first of all, we live in a mixed economy. We don't live in a capitalist. At least
Okay,
not a
whatever economy
capitalist.
we live in, whatever
Hold on,
economy
you
we live
ask
in,
me a
are you?
question.
Mugabe was Marxist and
Boy, when
Nyerere
I
was
ask me a
Stalinist.
question, when I ask me a question,
But we live in a mixed economy.
I'm not sure. When I ask me a question, I'm not sure answer. All right. So we live in a mixed economy. Even Zimbabwe, when the communist Mugabe they come to power, he never controlled the means of production like in the Soviet Union. However, there was heavy state involvement because as a Marxist, even when them come to power, it's like the PNP them and the other.
So was that a mixed
MPF.
economy then? Was that a mixed economy?
Hold
Then?
on, let me hold on my
No, but actually, I want you to stick to the question that I asked because we're speaking about Zimbabwe
I am
right now and I
answering the
answered it.
question. I am answering the question, Virgin. Yeah. So the Marxists, when them come to power, them don't the state own everything. Them only own some, or them have tremendous stake in private foreign companies because that's how them get to loot. Yeah. So the question you ask is, I'm not going to say dumb, it's more a misunderstanding of the current economic system. We don't live in a capitalist system, we live in a
Brother,
mixed
whatever
economy
the current
that
economic
have
system
lots
is,
that have
whatever
lots
the
of that has lots of
Let him finish with
dislocation, lots of cronyism and corruption that deny people who inherit or who farm land for decades, deny them the right to title because governments don't like to give land away to people because they like to control them, and land or ownership in general is control, is independence, right? And governments don't want that. And that's why the World Economic Forum elite said, you shall own nothing and be happy.
One quick question, Kofi.
Because that is
now,
how.
hold on a second, man.
So to answer the question, no, it is definitely not equitable and fair
okay, so
and
actually,
just.
so I've got the answer that I heard that I needed. Now that we can recognize that the current economic system, with whatever it might be, however you might describe it, and its method of distributing land is not equitable, and in the light of your having brought up Mugabe's land distribution scheme, what is the purpose of bringing that up as having not worked when what is currently in place is also not working and is not effective?
All right, so this is where the non sequitur come in. Yeah, it's the same thing in Jamaica in the
Wait, keep it
1960s.
when you mentioned Zimbabwe, the first place I would think.
Right. So this is where the non sequitur of leftists and socialists come in. Them look at the present inequities in the system and say, this is bad, this is inequitable, this is unjust. Therefore, state control, therefore socialism would be a solution to the problem. No, one don't follow the other, and Jamaica made that mistake in the 60s.
All right, quick question, Kofi. Thank you. Quick question.
One second, African Urban.
You're welcome. No, I'm done.
Before you come in, yeah, let me just repeat the words of the prophet very quickly. All right. The great white man has succeeded in subduing the world by forcing everybody to think his way, from his Bible to his fireside. He has given to the world from his Bible to his yellow newspaper sheet, a literature that establishes his right and sovereignty to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race. What you have just heard
Amen.
is an example of
Amen,
exactly what
brother. Amen.
Mugabe has just said there, right? From brother Coffee, unfortunately,
What?
because
What? What? What?
because and this is the nature of these things here, these discussions.
Yeah, because Mugabe was a
We,
Gavian.
we don't have time. We don't have time to
What they have
undo.
to do with anything,
Yeah,
bro?
we
Yo,
don't
if
have.
you're going to quote Gavi,
Sorry,
then
excuse
if you're
me,
going to
excuse
quote
me. Thank you very
Gavi
much.
in the context
Thank you very
of
much. May I talk? Thank you very much. May I talk?
No,
Thank you
he's
very much.
quoting Gavi and calling you
Hold on there,
basically in a very
Imhotep, give him a chance to talk. Imhotep, stop, stop interrupting.
hold on there. All right. Now, there's not time to undo all of the historical fallacies that brother Coffee just threw out, yeah, in relation to Zimbabwe. And this is a
No
good
time, I can't do it.
no, there isn't, because it's and you very well know this, right? It's a very good tactic to throw out all of these talking points, and then we have to spend time undoing every single one
Why
of
you
them.
always
Yeah?
assume dishonesty on my part?
I didn't say it's dishonest. I just said it's a good tactic, right?
No, he says or bad faith. Why you
you
always
call that a
assume bad
guilty
faith?
conscience. You call that a
It-
guilty conscience.
All right, boss. All right,
You
all
know what I
right,
mean?
all right.
No, because it's patently false, yeah, to paint Mugabe as this Marxist, yeah, coming into power, and then say that it was the land
Bobby Wright
redistribution.
said he was a
Sorry,
Marxist. Read
excuse
the
me,
Bobby Wright. He said Mugabe was a Marxist.
excuse me,
And
thank
we
you
all
very much.
know Mugabe was a Marxist.
Excuse me, thank you very much. Thank you. When Mugabe came to power in 1980, up until the year 2000, when ZANU PF went into the land redistribution program, Mugabe was a darling of the West, Britain in particular. He was Sir Robert Mugabe. He was knighted by the sovereign of the United Kingdom of Great Britain. During that period, Zimbabwe was
Narry kissed the Pope ring. So what?
excuse me, during that period, Zimbabwe, by all of the Western institutions that dominate in terms of global imperialism, was considered the breadbasket of Africa. All of their economic, what's the word? Indicators celebrated, the development of Zimbabwe and so on and so forth. It's just and the underbelly of that, the people, not Mugabe, the people, in particular the war veterans, were continuing to advocate on the land issue. Why? Because when Mugabe came to power, one of the things that was not allowed to be done as a result of the Lancaster House Agreement was that the government was not allowed to touch the land issue. What was supposed to happen is that in the year 1990, the British government was supposed to engage in a process whereby they buy back the land, because the people that the land was stolen from didn't have the resources to buy back the land, the money to buy back the land. They were supposed to engage some kind of process in the year
Yes, we
1990.
know the
Right?
history.
Indeed. So we don't know, right? So you
It
put
is
I'm
irrelevant to the point I was
I don't
making.
know. I don't know. Please, Shaka, tell us.
I'm not
You
sorry.
don't know
And
Lancaster?
I'm not sorry.
And
Excuse
the
me.
pivotal role Michael Manley played
Excuse
in
me.
No,
Lancaster
I don't know it
House.
either, Coffee. I don't know it either, Coffee, and most of the audience probably don't know it. Please be quiet. Thank you.
Right. So what happened was, yeah, basically the people in Zimbabwe were fighting this war, and they were fighting with support from places like Mozambique and other what they call frontline states, yeah. And it got to a point whereby the frontline states said that they couldn't continue the war. They didn't have the resources to continue the war. And so Mugabe and ZANU-PF had to go to the negotiating table. As a part of the negotiating table, which took place at Lancaster House in the UK, one of the clauses that was put into that agreement, yes, was that the government could not touch the land issue for 10 years. Yeah. And there was some agreement that the British government would come in and provide resources to address the reclamation of the land. The British government did not do so in 1990. Yeah. So the people under the government, whilst Mugabe was a darling of the West, were advocating and pressurizing the government on this issue. Yes. In 2000, in 1999 and into 2000, what happened was the war veteran them get vexed. Yeah, they've been advocating and campaigning on this issue for however long. The government now do nothing about it because they're in basically following dictates and waiting for Britain to hold up its end of the agreement. Britain never did so. Yeah, so the war veteran them start to move on the land. Yeah,
And instead of holding Britain to the fire, them hold Mugabe because it's Mugabe them was pressuring with that move because he needed the votes.
Excuse me. That's the nature
Stop
of the
being frightened.
All right.
One quick question though. Still have that question.
Yeah, man, ask the question because
I'm coming to you. I'm nearly
Shaka,
done. I'm nearly done. Yeah. So the point is that what happens is Zimbabwe is the breadbasket of Africa up until the war veterans begin to move on land that is theirs, yeah, right, and reclaim it. Mugabe had not two choices. He could have used the machinery of the state to mow down the war veterans and kill them off, and if he did so, he would be still be a darling of the West today. Or
no, he would lose the election.
Excuse me. Or he could support the war veterans. ZANU-PF as a government decided to support the war veterans. As a result of that, economic sanctions were placed on the nation. Yeah. So what happens is the propaganda now shifts. A literature that establishes his rights and sovereignty to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race. So now the nation that was the breadbasket of Africa for the past 20 years now becomes an economic basket case that cannot.
So the war veterans
Sorry, excuse me. Right, that cannot sustain itself and feed itself simply because they began to address the land issue. So the issue here was the printing press. It was propaganda. Yes, despite the fact that a propaganda warfare was waged against Zimbabwe, despite the fact that economic warfare was waged against Zimbabwe, the people of Zimbabwe were able to grow enough food to feed the nation. Yes, that is the point that was being made in relation to Zimbabwe and Mugabe at that time. That's the only one of those fallacies that I'm going to address today.
So in response to that, Zimbabwe's economy.
One second. African Herdsman, please.
Yeah, so I see we're back into the econ and stuff, so we're still trying to get to solutions. I just have the simple question for Kofi because he's very slippery himself, you know what I mean? I just want to pin down when exactly was capitalism actually being practiced according to his satisfaction. That's one. And for the viewers who might not understand what's going on right now, Jamaica had a significant political divide from in the 70s, right? And it created a polarity between people who be very much aligned right wing and people who sometimes are aligned left wing. So I'd just like to know from Kofi as well. Did he emigrate from Jamaica during the 70s or his family, or like how recently did he leave Jamaica?
My youth. A lot of people personal business. So watch yourself, you know. Watch yourself.
Just a question,
my rainbow people, you know. It's like you're interested in my private life. So mind yourself.
Brother, it's relevant. It's relevant in the context of ideology. You know exactly what you're asking and you're deflecting.
My personal life.
Listen, I have come on this panel before and said 5% income in
you want to know my bank account too?
Coffee. If you don't want to answer the question, you don't have to answer it now. So that you
want to answer. You move and go. Too personal. I don't want to know about him personal life.
Stand firm, Kofi. Stand firm.
You stand firm. My rainbow man, you know. You want to know my personal life and go stand firm. Watch yourself.
Hold on, man. The first question is not personal, however. The first question is not personal. The first question was about when was the capitalism as you would define it, has it existed in human history? When has it ever existed?
All right. So quickly before that question.
Wait, hold on, brother.
What should happen?
After brother Coffee answers, it have a question in the chat that somebody was trying to get to you, brother Shaka.
Oh,
well, to
sorry.
the panel.
All right. Thank you. Give thanks. Go ahead, Coffee. Go ahead.
Yeah, what should happen when Comrade Mugabe did come to power? him should have kick out all the white people, take the land and redistribute it or run it in the so-called authentic manner like Nyerere. And then the economic disaster would have naturally followed, and then there would have been no excuse to say, yeah, state control of resources is what Africa needs. Yeah. So that's one. Two, you ask, when was capitalism practiced? Capitalism, private ownership on the means of production, voluntary trade. Every time you voluntarily trade something, that is capitalism. Yeah? So every economy, every epoch, you have what is known as coercive trade and you have voluntary trade. Right? However, in the 16th century, 17th century, in Europe, because of certain internal squabbling and whatever, the voluntary aspect of trade, or the state control, began to be eroded. And then more and more entrepreneurship started to develop. And then you have the Industrial Revolution, where machinery and innovation take the place of slave labor, which is inefficient. And so the elites could no longer hold back the productive forces at that time. But there was always germs or elements of free trade, of capitalism, of private
Can you
ownership.
answer the question though, like definitively? Cause it does sound like a filibuster.
I thought it was just me who just wasn't understanding.
He needs a period of time, Coffee. What period of time are you talking about?
I told you, the 16th century, that's when more the state, you see, you don't listen because you just...
Where? Time and place, bro. Time and place.
What me did say before?
Just say the time and place, Coffee. Just say the time and place.
Mars. That's
right,
what
cool.
it said. 16th century Mars.
Yes, sir.
16th century. Yeah, almost
we have what time is it now? Okay. We're gonna get 15 more minutes. Yeah.
It's nation time.
Indeed. Now the reality is that and I've chosen not to respond to all of the straw manning in terms of state ownership and all them things, because nobody never said nothing at the start. But
you was running the farms.
That's more a literature that establishes his right and sovereignty to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race. What it is, brothers and sisters, just so you understand what that is, and then we're going to answer this brethren question. Yeah, there is a narrative, a framework here that is created by there's a lot of the same think tanks that I was referring to earlier. Yeah, and so in order for them to be able to attack an argument, they need it to fit into one of the frameworks that they've already established. Yeah, so they create a dichotomy between private ownership and state ownership, as though these are the only two possibilities. So if you're not talking about individual and private ownership, which is really nothing to do with the masses of the people having it, having their own private thing. It's about the elite, being able to monopolize, right?
That's not true.
Privacy in their own interest. That's literally what it is in actual terms. We're talking about capitalism as it actually develops.
Which theory? Which capitalist theory said that? Theorist.
Not in. You haven't let me finish. I was gonna say we're talking about capitalism as it actually develops, not just in people's book. And the theories that they write.
But that's not true either. You have tons of black people who have private property and lift themselves out of poverty with private property, selling them labor.
Excuse me, please. Thank you very much. Yeah. So the idea is that they create this dichotomy and try to fit everybody's argument into one of the into one of these two parts. Yeah. So I've chosen not to respond to it. I'm just making you know that is the argument that is being put forward, the straw man that was put forward a while ago. Now, when it comes to this question,
even Garvey recognized the importance of private property,
which is an interesting question.
Call the part where he call himself a capitalist.
I have a question for the panel. Are y'all of the opinion that Boers, and I'm gonna add Anglo to that, Anglo Boers, because them come from Britain and Dutchland and all them things, two of them colonized the place, should be kicked out of Africa? You know what I originally read that? I read South Africa, which is the place that they're predominant, the Boers, that is. Some pragmatists suggest that would be a grave mistake, but I have other ideas. I'd be interested to hear what your other ideas are. My opinion on this is that their presence is less of an issue than their power. Yeah. I'm not necessarily against kicking them out, and especially after apartheid. Yeah, I think that would have been an opportune moment to do some kicking out. Having said that, the issue to me is less their presence than the power that they hold. There are many African and Caribbean nations where the white population is 1% or less, but they still wield a significant amount of the economic and political power. There are nations whereby the white population is completely insignificant, yet they still wield a significant proportion of the political and economic power. Yeah. So whereas kicking them out might be a road to achieving that, it is not necessarily one. So my inclination would be to focus on the political and economic power issues. Yes. Then migratory patterns will take care of themselves. Yeah. When Mugabe take back the land, Britain opened its doors. Yeah. To its children in Zimbabwe, the Rhodesian them, the children of Cesaros in Zimbabwe. After 2000, they were able to seek refuge in our Britain, the mother country. Yes, after them are Zimbabwean and Rhodesian for however long. Them remember them history very quick. Yeah, when Africans said no more of this foolishness come off our land. Yeah, and I
The
believe
same
that
thing happened to the Asians in Uganda. They went to
once
England.
we begin to assume African power, the European will find his place. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Quite expeditiously in that respect. That's my humble offering to answer your question.
Yeah, I think we generally like with most things we mix up goals and means and aims. You know, the aim that Idi Amin had was noble, was a black empowerment. Yeah, what the means not going, you're not going to achieve black empowerment by making Uganda less attractive to investment, both inside and outside. If the government can seize your property from the Indians, why not go and seize your property on some other pretense? In Jamaica, we have the same knife, joke goat, joke sheep. Yeah, if the state, not the state, looks so cavalier at property rights, then yeah, you can laugh after the whites and the Indian, but it will come down upon you. And in Africa, that happened enough, where it come down upon black people same way, or even worse. Yeah, so again, we mix up goals and means too much. That's the
So
problem.
again, we've got this dichotomy again between state and we're not gonna follow you down the rabbit hole there. No, the Idi Amin bomb where you tried up a while ago. We're not gonna engage.
The what?
The
Who's
Idi
supposed to
Amin
be answering the question,
yeah.
too?
So the reality is this. That
Yeah, I would say yeah. Kick all of them out and then run it like how Nairi did run it. So when everything crashed as it normally do, then we won't have an excuse anymore. Kick everybody,
Okay,
Indians, the Chinese, the
Yeah,
whites,
yeah.
and then stop
So we have
trading with
coffee,
everybody
I
because trading with
agree.
outside is
Let
imperialism. And when we do that and it crash, then we don't have
let
no excuse. Hurry up and get it out of
we
the
have
way.
coffee.
let
We have
all of our
coffee on
mistakes
tape.
be our own. Sorry, I was gonna say that's true. Let all of our mistakes be our own. Yeah, that
Of
would
course,
be a
yeah.
really-
Yeah, but we
So
keep making it over and
we also
over.
have coffee.
However,
We
We
also
keep
have
making
coffee
it the
on
same
tape.
mistakes over and over.
However, this is the same argument though that the same neoliberals give, yeah,
Here
in
we
relation
go.
in relation to these issues, yeah. And the reality is that the West has never stopped trading with Africa and the Caribbean. Trade go on, or the West.
But
has
I'll tell you already,
sorry,
it's a small.
excuse me. The West has never stopped investing, yeah, in Africa and the Caribbean. It's never stopped, yeah. What we're talking about, however, is a literature that establishes his right and sovereignty
What's
to
the
the
percentage of
disadvantage
Western investment
of
in
the human
Africa?
race. And so, what's taking
Brother
place here?
Coffee.
Sorry, one second. Let me show you what's taking place here, right? This is an example of the same thing that I began to talk about at the beginning of the show, because a lot of the conversation that we're having at the moment is designed to deflect from how Western Europe is trying to rewrite history in order to reestablish its right and sovereignty to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race. Why? Because the people that they have colonized have begun to take more charge of the writing of our own history, and that history tends to challenge the legitimacy of that sovereignty. Okay, and
That can
so
be the reason why the
ex-
Santos doing it, because we
ex-
were writing our own history long
Yo,
before critical
can we
race
get back
theory.
on the question though?
excuse me, please.
Yo,
Yeah, I do want to answer the question. I do want to answer the question when he's finished. When you finish,
Then
brother.
now we come and one of the ways of neutralizing the effectiveness of Africans writing our own history is to control the nature of the conversation, what we converse about. Yeah. So us highlighting Wedemadu and presenting that analysis to our people is problematic to that agenda. So now we have to have some other kind of conversation that deflects us and doesn't allow us to actually explore that properly. Yeah. And I humbly suggest that this idea of coming, what is development? Broad question.
And you accuse, yeah man, you accuse me
right? Of
yeah,
course.
because you are the only brave person to answer it.
Hide that talking.
Everybody run from it.
Hide that talking. Yeah.
Everybody run from it.
Literally. No,
Yo, Melaman gone back to Paleolithic era to write it.
I didn't say.
Give me a little ease now, coffee.
I never said not about running, But the point I'm making is, however, that this is a tactic, right? It's a way, and it's not just you, coffee.
Oh,
it's
come on.
A general thing that takes place, right? So we don't want to explore the history and how they are rewriting the history and wanting to tell the history and what political purposes it is designed to serve. And by doing so, we're going to tacitly or covertly feed the agenda by saying things like, well, if you don't trade with people and allow them to invest, as though that is the problem, right? What's it called? So, as though investment and trade is the problem.
That's one of the problems, That's one of the problems.
And so the argument is being made that we don't want trade with people or have people I invest in our way. Or, you know what I'm saying? We don't want to invest in other people for that matter. Yeah. This is
the problem is you can't speak for we, quote unquote, we. That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, maybe so, but if that goes for me, then it certainly goes for yourself, right?
And that's why I said let investment come, and if who want to trade will trade.
The only difference, and the only difference is the historical and geopolitical center that we are operating from, and which will define whose interest we are trying to speak on behalf of. And the reality is that there is a narrative that establishes the right and sovereignty of the white man to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race. And I am challenging, that right and sovereignty using a historical analysis. Okay. Now, the question therefore becomes, who is supporting the historical narrative of the Western imperialist white man? And what interest do Africans have in championing the narrative of the historical narrative of the Western imperialist white man? That becomes the question.
All right, let's go back to the question. Meloman saying what answer.
We have 5 minutes left.
Yo, you say
our closing words time right here now. You have to do some closing words. Yeah, you have to do some closing words.
Okay.
I bet. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, with regard to the Boers, my idea of Pan-Africanism is not one where we rule the world by ourselves and all the other races are wiped out. I would like to see South Africa in peace, brotherly love between all races. So I think the Boers should be allowed to stay in Africa, and I'd hope that they'd be able to get to some equitable balance down there, right? Now, one other thing, even insinuating in any way at all, jokingly, that I have anything close to a rainbow lifestyle is very insulting, right? But just to make the audience understand, Stand Firm is a slogan from in the 70s, right? Where the left leaning side of Jamaica was insisting that the people should stand firm in the sovereignty and the decision made by the democracy to elect a particular government, whereas the opposition was
You
spreading
mean
slogans
socialist
like
but left leaning?
them want saltfish over books and stuff like that. So you have one side
Well,
that was
turn them
willing
back, Eddie.
to
Turn them back.
bend. Hold on, one side was willing to bend for food and sweets from the US, whereas another side was insisting to stand firm.
And
Right,
that's
so
why
that's just
Manley
a
went to the
clarification
IMF.
for the audience.
By the
And that's
way,
why
by the
Manley
way,
went to the
family,
IMF.
by the way, family, by the way, family, on my personal channel, ShakaRa Speaks, I have a good 2 or 3 series show where we break down some of this history of Jamaica, featuring my father and a scholar activist by the name of Cecil Gutsmore, Elder. Yeah, it got through the whole of them history there, and it breaks down what Melaman was just saying, you know, in some significant detail as
Oh,
far as the 70s is
Stanford.
concerned, and what was going on over there. So, all right, is that your last word, African Earthman?
Yeah, man, big up yourself.
Give thanks, King, and you've made some very valuable contributions to the show today. So I appreciate you. Must come through more often. Yeah, with them talk there. All right, give thanks. Coffee got through.
Yeah, quickly. Garvey wanted trade between, as him said, the Asians and the Europeans. Yeah. So the idea that you know that we should cut ourselves off because trade is imperialist or capitalist is not in sync with what Garvey was saying. And that don't mean that the current crop of politicians are what Garvey would have wanted. But the idea of capitalism, property rights, the role of profits is what Garvey wanted, yeah, and trade.
Okay.
So the comrade Melaman talked about peace in South Africa. He want to leave the Boers alone, but he want a peaceful South Africa, peaceful and prosperous, yeah, which is what everybody, which is what most people who aren't extremists, quote unquote, would want. Point is, you can only get that if you recognize property rights. The day you don't recognize a person's right to his own labor and his own property justly acquired is the day you have a breakdown in peace, because all animals, including humans, fight over property. The difference between us and the monkeys is that we can sort out a contractual society, a society based on tolerance and property rights and exchange. Yeah, we can sort out certain ideals, certain principles, the non-aggression principle that would foster a productive and prosperous society. Yeah, and none of those ideas comport with the current crop of African leaders, except probably Rwanda and Botswana. Yeah.
Go ahead, Imhotep.
I bet. So in the first place, I can't remember what Brother Coffee was responding to, but when he mentioned that we would make our countries unattractive to foreign investment, like your grandfathering in, or rather he is grandfathering in.
Foreign and domestic. Foreign and domestic.
Okay, well, clearly I'm not speaking about domestic investment. I'm only speaking about foreign investment.
No, but you're quoting me. You said you're referring to me, and I wasn't talking about only foreigners. I was talking about domestic.
I am speaking about only nothing that you're saying now.
Well, don't call my name then. If you're going to quote me out of, you're going to quote me.
So anyway, the idea that we need to make either our diasporic countries or continental countries attractive to European investment by leaving them in possession of land unjustly acquired, I think is fallacious. I think it is a conscious and I willing to say malicious addition to the conversation that we are having. Separately, also we now have Brother Coffee on tape, unbidden, wishing ill to the nation of South Africa. In his original response to the question about the Boers, when he said yes, they should kick them all out so that Africa could fail, all the policies could fail, and South Africa will be would be in problems, right? So I want to highlight for the audience because
Boy,
I
you
don't
can
even know if
twist
the
up people words. I
even
tell
know
you,
if the
yo, you're a
I
real
don't even
politician now.
know
Now you say you
I
want to go
don't
into
even
politics.
know I don't even know if the audience needs me to clarify for them
Ah,
that
boy.
clearly your contributions are disingenuous, but I will say from my opinion that it is consciously disingenuous and malicious, right?
You're
And
a real
geared towards
politician.
thank you for the compliment, and geared towards
Yo.
disrupting the advancement of the community that the brother ShakaRa is trying to build here. And in my answer to the brother's question, to the brother Trigger Happy, to the brother Trigger Happy's question about the Boers, I am inclined, without much historical research into the situation in South Africa, to say, of course, kick them the hell out. As far as I'm concerned, they should not have been there in the first place. I am not entirely too concerned about how they fare after they leave. That's their concern to study. I'm in my fantasy world where we had the military and we wasn't going to get invaded, we be in South Africa in this case, where we had the military and we wouldn't be invaded. For doing it, I would just take the land by law, as in pass a law and just take all of the land, not be not paying them for anything, and let them. I'm not forcing it to leave the land, but I mean it's ours now, so I don't know what you're gonna do. But in reality, I think it would be much more reasonable if they were to pay them under the value of the land, but pay them for the land so that they have a little nest egg to go and set up there wherever it is in whatever refugee country, whatever European country will take them in as refugees. So at least they have something to start off themselves with. But in my answer to the question, most definitely we should be kicking them
Right,
out of Africa. All
right,
of
right,
these, yeah.
you know,
And
you finish?
who would
Oh, but
invest
also
in South Africa after that?
Sorry, you finish?
the rest of Africa, the domestic investment
Yeah,
that you was
but
talking about,
if
South
the state
Africa
can
and
take
the
away your land, the state cannot take away your land. So why they can't come
What?
up
yeah,
with
but
Hold on
some
there.
you said
Hold on
excuse?
in your
there.
original,
Hold on there.
As
Hold on there.
Africans,
Hold on there.
as
Sorry, hold on
African
there.
governments have
Hold on
always
there.
done,
Hold on there.
they
Hold on there. Hold on
always
there.
come up
Hold
with
on.
some excuse to
Hold on
take
there.
African
Hold on
land.
there. I start mute people now, because I don't know discipline. All right. What's it called? Imhotep, will you finish the point that you were making? Will you finish your closing word?
For the most part, I also wanted, I think I messaged you privately, but I wanted to send you something wherever you're in.
Oh yeah.
So I will, yeah. But
Tell the truth.
in response to Brother Coffee, who is going to want to invest there? You said in your original contribution that they are taking it away for very particular. Number one, you had to pass a law to take away people land unless you're just killing them and taking it from them, right? So in the law is going to have very specific circumstances in which you can take the law. Unless
That law is already in
would
South Africa.
why
That law
would
is
our
there.
Sorry,
Restitution.
family. We're not continuing the debate right now. We are close the show.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
Well, so I'm asking a rhetorical question in this case. Why would a country who has positive intentions for the people and the nation of South Africa be repulsed by a law which takes, well, I don't know what the specific law is, so I can't speak to the specific law, but by a law which says that in certain extenuating circumstances, when you are working against South Africa, we will take your land. Why would a country that, or a
Not a
company that has
country,
good things,
people. Not a
why would
country,
a
people.
company why would a
People.
company that has good
Ex-
why would a company that has good things in store for the people and the nation of South Africa be repulsed by such a law? Only the
Excellent.
ones that
Because
actually
All right.
property rights
Excellent.
are important.
all right, I hear, brother. My bad.
Yeah.
I
No,
sorry.
we're going to deal with it. All right. Give tax coffee. Yeah, give tax Imhotep. We're gonna send you the two of them back now. Yeah, but always good conversations. All right, family. So yeah, today, I'm saying we was having a conversation that began by talking about historical narratives. Yeah. The reality is that there is a political move at the moment. Yeah. In certain countries. Yeah. In particular, the West, in particular, Britain and America, in relation to those who they have enslaved and colonized having the power to write our own history. That history challenges their supremacy in this world, their geopolitical supremacy and economic supremacy in this world. Yeah. And as Papa Garvey said, and I'm going to read it again, the great white man has succeeded in subduing the world by forcing everybody to think his way from his God to his fireside. He has given to the world from his Bible to his yellow newspaper sheet. a literature that establishes his right and sovereignty to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race. The white man's propaganda has made him the master of the world, and all those who have come in contact with it and accepted it have become his slaves. All those who have come in contact with it and not just come in contact with it, you have to also accept it. So in relation to the last part of this conversation that has just been taking place, if the white man cannot bring his head and get his head around African people writing our own history for ourselves and challenging the supremacy that they have written into the historical narratives, if our telling of our own history is unattractive to them, I hasten to suggest that us operating economically and politically in our own interest is going to be unattractive to them. And that we should become very comfortable with our economic, political, and unattractiveness. Economic, political, and historical unattractiveness in relation to the white man. We must become very comfortable with our political, economic, and historical unattractiveness to the white man. All those who have come in contact with it and accepted it have become his slaves. When we become preoccupied with looking attractive to the white man, the Western imperialist, when we become preoccupied with making sure that our political policies look attractive to him, that our economic policies look attractive to him, that our historical narrative look attractive to him, we become his slave. When we reject the need to look attractive to him, we begin the process of liberation. And let us be clear, brothers and sisters, that currently our political and economic policies, as well as the history that we teach in our schools, in our majority African nations in Africa and the Caribbean, right now are very attractive to the white man. The white man in America and Britain and France is very attracted by our current political and economic condition. They are reaping the rewards and the benefits of that current status right now. And we see the condition that we are in as a result. Their attractiveness to us is not leading to our liberation, our sovereignty, and our development. So let us vow to make ourselves very ugly and unattractive to the white man. Yeah, we must look ugly to the white man. We must look ugly like Nat Turner did look. We must look ugly like Shaka Zulu did look. We must look ugly like Dessalines the Ferocious did look. We must look ugly like Mbuya Nehanda did look. We must look ugly like Kim Pavita did look. Yeah. We must look ugly like Marcus Garvey did look. Also, if we look ugly to the white man. And if you want to learn more about how we can become and make ourselves as unattractive as possible to the white man, please join us for the Mosiah opening ceremony. This coming Mosiah, August, next month, we will be speaking. Well, I have the honor of delivering the keynote address for the Messiah opening ceremony. And I'll be speaking on the subject of scientific Garveyism, a working idealism for the 21st century and beyond. I invite you, kings and queens, once again, alkebalan.org, alkebalan.org/Mosiah for more information. Finally, Papa Garvey says, the Universal Negro Improvement Association is now calling upon 400 million members of our race to discard the psychology and propaganda of all other peoples and to advance our own. We must discard them propaganda. We must discard, and in discarding their propaganda, we discard their psychology. And in discarding their psychology, we discard our need and our desire to operate politically and economically in their interest. 10 more, be thankful unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe. Kudzai Mozimu Mukulu, give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Fahodie, Abibi Tumi, African liberation and African power for all African people. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
Fire burn them dirty king, blaze up them dirty king, fire burn them king, send him disastrous, and time he fast with us, ancestors walk with us, fire burn them king.
Mina bakabusi nengre, mine bele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre, me fele sama.
Mina bakabusi nengre, mine bele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre, me fele sama.
Mina bakabusi nengre, mine bele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre, me fele sama.
Mina bakabusi nengre, mine bele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre, me fele sama.
Mina bakabusi nengre, mine bele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre, me fele sama.
Mina bakabusi nengre, mine bele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre, me fele sama.
Mina bakabusi nengre, mine bele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre, me fele sama.
Mina bakabusi nengre, mine bele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre, me fele sama.
Mina
bakabusi nenge, minebele o.